case number 2 tonight, we are digging back into one of our main case, or one of our main case that we're covering right now, which is the Idaho 4 case, and the main suspect being Bryan Kohberger, who is right now and currently sitting in a jail in Latah County Jail, going through pretrial to find out if there's evidence proving he is the person that was the conductor of the quadruple homicide in Moscow, Idaho. Well, if you guys are one of our viewers that have been watching for a long time, you have been with us going through all the case documents. Well, we just read one recently. Actually, I think you read this document last time as an update, and I needed to return back to it because I feel like I didn't completely understand it. I didn't chew on it enough to have a good concept of it. And I think there are some very, 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 very interesting things in here that, in my opinion, I need to clarify and clear up based on some of the videos and things that I'm seeing. So what document am I talking about? I'm talking about the document that was submitted, January 12th, 2024 by Ann C. Taylor, State of Idaho versus Bryan C. Kohberger. That document is motion to unseal defendant's motion to reconsider orders, D'ing motions to dismiss the indictment, and in the alternative for permission to appeal from interlocutory orders. Now, when we went through that, we determined that Bryan Kohberger wanted to unseal these documents of the requests and everything that has to do with the grand jury and the issues that they had with the grand jury. And what's interesting that we didn't understand is every single document that has to do with that request, that one document that we're talking about, this request would unseal all of them. Now, which ones specifically am I talking about? So in May of 2023, well, actually it started in December. In December, the judge came forward after they tried to review the grand jury indictment, and Judge came forward on December 15th and denied the motion to throw out the grand jury, and stated that they are going to move forward. Then the defense in this situation files another motion, essentially asking Judge to, hey, I know that you ruled on this, but will you reconsider your ruling, right? And that pretty much brings us up to here and now, where now we have the defense on top of those two motions to now bring this to light. And what's interesting is within this request, they also make a comment saying that the prosecution requested them to gag it. And ever since you initially brought this up, the whole time I had been chewing on this. The prosecution requests to gag it. The prosecution asked the defense to gag it. What could that mean? Like, what does that mean? Because the initial reading of it made me feel like there was something shady going on, right? Well, I watched a whole bunch of videos, and I got to give a shout out to one of the people on here, one of the defense attorneys. I think I found a new life partner, and I've said that quite a few times, but this is the new one on the table right now. But it is a Natalie Whittingham, and she is a YouTuber, a defense attorney YouTuber. And her handle is at Natalie Lawyer Chick. And she was on the Law and Crime Network going through the breakdown of this case. And her arguments were incredible. I mean, she wasn't there backing Bryan Kohberger, but she was there defending the law in general. Now, some of the things she said is and most of these arguments are from that, but some of the things that she talked about is like, why could the defense all of a sudden want this out?
Okay.
For one, it doesn't matter why they want it out. Okay. So what I found really important here is that she said asking to ungag this, Bryan Kohberger has the upper hand because he is the defendant at hand here. The prosecution doesn't have any power when it comes to the defendant having an open and public trial. And the evidence of that is the Sixth Amendment. And the Sixth Amendment states, the Sixth Amendment guarantees the rights of criminal defendants, including the right to a public trial without unnecessary delay, the right to a lawyer, the right to an impartial jury, and the right to know who your accusers are and the nature of the charges and evidence against you. It has been most visibly tested in a series of cases involving terrorism, but much more often figures in cases that involve jury selection or the protection of witnesses, including victims of sex crimes, as well as witnesses in need of protection from retaliation. Essentially, what that's saying is, in cases of terrorism, this doesn't apply when it has to do with national security or anything like that. Now, it states word for word, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witness against him, to have a compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Now, she says in here that this amendment actually protects the public's right to a public trial and the defendants. So what's interesting is when all this first came out, you have people like, Jesse Weber, which very clearly he feels a certain way that this trial is going. He feels that Bryan Kohberger is guilty. I get it, right? But what's interesting is someone with his experience, I'm a little surprised when you watch some of his content and he's the one saying things like, what could Bryan Kohberger and his defense team be up to? Are they out here tainting the jury pool by asking to have this ungagged?
Yeah, I find that tainting the jury pool argument is used as like
A one-size-fits-all?
a one-size-fits-all argument for anything and everything in this case to excuse the lack of transparency.
Yeah, his rights.
Yeah, and if he wants it to all be out there, I feel he has that right to have it all out there, because the public, the reason we even have this amendment, the reason that our country, back when that amendment was written, had the forethought to create that amendment is that when you have all eyes, the public watching a trial, you have oversight built in by the public. So if something is funky here, if something's going wrong here, it can be called out.
Yeah. And she actually says that too. And that's what's incredible when I was watching that interview with her is she says, defense attorneys know best that sunshine is the best disinfectant for an improper case. And I loved that comment and think that's incredible. Now, just to be very clear here, she wasn't speaking directly about the Bryan Kohberger case, claiming something is improper. We just don't have that evidence yet to know one way or the other. But it's very, very, very important that we know, and the people know in general, that Bryan Kohberger asking for this to be ungagged, that is the standard. Is the documentation to be public? That is the standard. The standard isn't everything to be gagged.
Sealed.
So why is it so strange and used in I almost feel like it's being used in a manipulative way when you take the defendant wanting to have a fair and public trial and twist it and say, oh, they're just trying to taint the jury pool. No, actually, he's just exercising his basic human rights given to him because he's a citizen of the US and protected by these amendments.
Yeah, he's protecting his right to have this trial conducted
Exercising his right.
In the light, we're in the view of the public, because that is his right. It just is what it is. The whole thing about tainting the jury pool just really rubs me the wrong way when people use that as like a one size fit all answer to it all. Especially in this day and age, in the technology era where information is accessible to all, like, is that even, when you see secrecy like this, it's already a red flag. That is the biggest red flag for me in the entire case, is the lack of transparency.
Yeah.
Is that they want all of this conducted in the shadows. That should be a red flag for anybody.
I agree with you. 100%. I agree with you 100%. So going into this then, what are the implications here? Like, what do we think is the benefit for this to be ungagged, open, allowed for the public to take in and be a part of? I don't think it's anything manipulative. And if anything, I think that it shows integrity from the defense team, honestly, in this situation, because, you know, as they're talking through this, it's really interesting because she said that, here's a couple reasons why the defense would give in to the prosecution asking to have this gagged. They could have still had an investigation going on at this time, and the defense trying to have integrity, giving them the space to continue their investigation. Now, another reason is that it doesn't have anything to do with the prosecution, and maybe the defense this whole time has been gagging everything, keeping it out of the light in the hopes that the judge would have enough elbow room to make some uncommon rulings in this situation and maybe allow Bryan Kohberger to go home as he's going through this trial. And those are some things that she, as a defense attorney, would do sometimes, some tactics. And I didn't think of that. I had no idea about that. I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. So since this is the pre-trial and not the actual trial, you have the defense who is essentially playing that helping hand card until really it comes down to crunch time. And now they're like, okay, look, we've helped you out. You asked us to seal this, you asked us to gag this, and we helped you. But now is the time that this information needs to come out.
Yeah, I don't think they would have been trying to get him to go home. I think that,
I mean, that's a stretch, but just an example.
I think that, them sealing everything so that the public eyes aren't on it for right now to help judge make some uncommon decisions would make sense, especially considering we were dealing with the whole IGG debacle, which there is very little precedent set in an active investigation, active court case, pre-trial, like getting ready to go to trial in such a major capital murder case, quadruple homicide case.
Yeah.
That is literally like global, on global scale. So I think that is very possible that it was a tactic to give him that room to make those decisions. And it's not only the IGG, it's also the them trying to get it dismissed with the grand jury indictment because of prosecutorial misconduct, hiding of exculpatory evidence. All of those reasons we don't even get to see because they were sealed. maybe they were also wanting him to make uncommon decisions with that too. So they decided to start sealing things. Like, there's many things they were wanting Judge to make decisions on. And now that he's made those decisions, he just ruled on the IGG. He put out his official ruling with the grand jury indictment and, denying that motion and everything to get it overturned. So maybe that's why that would make sense. Like, now is the time to get this unsealed.
Yeah.
And they're also trying to appeal, the interlocutory appeal. Yeah. So it would make sense to want this information out to the public now.
Yeah, I think it makes sense also because, and remember, everything is done in court with an intention. They have an end goal there. So any of the documents that are submitted, they're submitted with an end goal. Now, this document, like you said, specifically focused on the grand jury, and they talk a little bit about the grand jury in here and what that could mean and the implications that unsealing this document could offer the defense team in this situation. And they still don't have a trial date. So, like, we still have a long way to go. So it's interesting looking at the dots connected here, that the grand jury was convened, right? And the grand jury was given a certain outline to follow. Now, everything in a case is supposed to be out in the open and be public, except for the grand jury. Everything is, except for the grand jury. So that also made me wonder, could they have started using the grand jury to create this this gagged expectation from the public? Because really the grand jury's been the biggest deal in this, and the IGG. So now that they're unsealing this, like you said, there could be some exculpatory evidence within the grand jury. I think they're looking for the indictment to be thrown out. I really think they're looking for it to be thrown out because you have the grand jury indictment, then you have the defense showing questions within that grand jury. Then they're asking the judge to get the grand jury indictment thrown out based on all these factors. The judge rules on that. Then you have the defense coming back out again saying, hey, judge, we want you to reconsider your ruling on the grand jury. Oh, and by the way, we also want this all taken out and made public. It's a smart move. That's a really, really smart move to then continue the attack on that grand jury, especially if they feel like something is flawed.
Well, you're also leaving out the interlocutory appeal, which I think is an important addition to this equation. Like, that adds more because he has to make a ruling on that, of whether he will allow that to go through or not. And it has to do with the grand jury indictment and wanting it dismissed. And I think that the prosecutorial misconduct literally has to do with the grand jury and how Bill Thompson and his, office, his lawyers that work with him on this case, how they handled that. And I think that Ann Taylor really wanted that preliminary hearing. And that's one thing that really sucks about grand juries, is especially when you already had a preliminary hearing scheduled. Like, you were supposed to do that. That's the plan. And then to suddenly take it to a secret grand jury, that automatically does kind of set a precedence for secrecy if the prosecutor wants this tried in the shadows. That immediately starts hiding information. A preliminary hearing, we would have all got to have heard all of these things. The defense would have been able to call witnesses and people to the stand.
Yeah.
And they didn't get to do that. Instead, all of it was hidden and secret. And then from there on, everything just more and more started getting sealed and gagged.
Yeah. And looking into the grand jury, because really, I think that, like I said in the beginning, that is an interesting part of it, because I think you're right. But it all has to do with the grand jury and everything surrounding the grand jury and having that be made public. Obviously, what happened within the grand jury is not going to be public. That is always secret, but all of the documents that have to do with the grand jury should be open. And there's really no reason for Judge to deny this. There shouldn't be any if he turned this down from unsealing this, Judge would have to have a very good reason for that, because this is an amendment right of Bryan Kohberger's to have this out in the open. Now, one thing I started looking into with this is the indictment possibly being thrown out. The prosecution withheld potential evidence that could be exculpatory, and the grand jury given the wrong directions and the wrong standard of proof. Now, in most every other state in the US, the standard of proof that this grand jury used wouldn't have been acceptable. In Idaho, it is acceptable.
What are you talking about?
The standard of proof for this grand jury. In Idaho, this is the expectation, their standard of proof. And that standard of proof is probable cause in the grand jury in Idaho. Now, probable cause is a very low standard, essentially used by police to determine an arrest, more than most states allow within their grand jury. So I think that's one interesting area to highlight too, because there are a lot of people out there that believe that Bryan Kohberger is guilty and believe there is all this evidence. And in my opinion, I think the case is a little bit weaker, even if he is guilty. Okay, I'm looking at it from the side of guilt here. Even if he is guilty, I think that the investigation and case is weaker than we think, because the grand jury's standard of proof is a probable cause standard of proof, meaning there just has to be some connection for what's allowed. And did you know, in the grand jury, because it is a probable cause standard of proof, they're allowed to insert hearsay as evidence? Gossip.
That's ridiculous.
Gossip. It's because it's such a low standard of proof. So when a cop, let's say a cop pulls you over, okay, and you have an open beer in your center console, that's probable cause to search you right there.
Yeah.
And that beer is actually an ashtray and hasn't had beer in it for 3 months. But that's enough probable cause for that cop to search you at that time, to break your rights and search your car.
But wait, you can get an open container ticket. Like, you can get a charge.
Yeah, you're loopholing there's no alcohol in it. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
So it doesn't change anything. You could just change the example then. Let's say you had a pot pipe sitting in there with no residue, nothing in it. It was just bought, and that's enough probable cause to allow a cop to search you, right? So it's the same kind of example here. So going back into the probable cause hearing and what's allowed, hearsay is allowed.
Yeah,
so,
that's absurd to me. Like, I can't even believe that. But you're saying that the standard probable cause is not the same in Idaho as it is for most states?
Yeah, I mean, most states don't even use grand juries anymore. California's grand jury system is nothing like this. It's done on a quarterly basis to essentially audit trials. Most states don't use this system because it's unreliable and manipulated and used in a way that it's a prosecutorial tool to work around rules.
Yeah.
So I have a question and a theory, is not a theory because I don't have evidence of it except for some of the hearsay that we've heard in the community.
A speculation.
But, so we know that one of the roommates was there, right?
Both, right?
And hearsay
One.
is allowed. And we've heard on multiple different occasions, and I'm going to bring this up in the beginning. Do you remember in the very beginning of the investigation, we heard that both of them were on the first floor, and then that changed. And then Fry says that they weren't eyewitnesses, but they were there.
Yeah.
Then it came, oh, I saw something. I saw bushy eyebrows, and I saw somebody that was 5'10" walking towards the back door. It makes me wonder, did they know the reliability around that eyewitness account was slim to none? That's why they needed the grand jury, because they know that that eyewitness account is going to get picked apart. However, in a grand jury, they knew it wouldn't, because hearsay is allowed. And for those of you that don't know, hearsay could literally be gossip. Now, people do have to swear that they're telling the truth. However, how often have we seen where people lie in court?
And is it also a way to hide or just omit, not even talk about exculpatory evidence?
Because very well could
it said you can indict a ham sandwich with a grand jury. That's the saying. So, I mean, is that a way that a prosecutor who, wants this conviction, they're gung-ho about this conviction, to hide or just not talk about exculpatory evidence because the defense isn't there to ask questions and demand that witness to be talked to?
Yeah, I mean,
AKA Bethany Funk.
This defense attorney literally said that it is very, 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 very unlikely that if you have a suspect that is being convened through a grand jury, it is very unlikely that it's going to come out in the defendant's favor.
Oh, yeah, for sure. With a grand jury, of course.
Unlikely, because of the standard of proof and evidence that's allowed there. And we did a whole video on this. I just don't think I understood just how low that bar is.
Yeah, I don't think I completely understood how low that bar was either, but it was beat in my head over and over that you could indict a ham sandwich, meaning the standard proof was pretty low, but I didn't realize hearsay could be used. Like, you could get somebody indicted off rumors.
Right.
And minimal evidence.
I didn't either. And she goes on to say that the evidence that's allowed in a grand jury is such a low standard that that most of it is not allowed in a jury trial. Yeah. And you know what's interesting? So after hearing this, I went back and I read the document a couple more times. And in the last sentence here, did you catch this? So Mr. Kohberger has a right for the rule to apply as it is written, rather than disadvantage him with items remaining sealed that are not within the scope. As it is written. We've already heard that argument brought up once when it came to the grand jury and Mr. Kohberger's rights to use the law as it is written. And that's the same ruling that we saw Judge make, where he said, oh, that's a very interesting argument that is actually above my head.
Yeah, I don't agree with him on that, simply because how do you think precedence is set?
I agree.
He could have used his discretion and he could have ruled in their favor, and what's going to happen there? That's bad. Like, he just set new precedent.
I agree with you, and it's not even that. Like, that the precedent, the legal precedence drives me up the wall, because that takes power away from the people. And our laws and amendments were created with the power of the people in mind. This is our justice system. We own this system. And when there is legal precedence like this, that is now the law being changed in favor of the judge and prosecutors or defendant, who knows? So I agree with you. I think that's a very real argument that should have been taken more into account in this situation, because the law as it is written is what's closest to the people and the public. And that's what the laws are there to protect.
Yeah.
Not the prosecutors, not the judges. They include them, but not their positions. They are there to protect the people in these situations. Now, if Bryan Kohberger's guilty, we've said this time and time and time again. I hope that he rots in jail, if he's guilty. I don't know. My biggest concern at the moment is not Bryan Kohberger. It's the validity of this investigation. And these are why we're asking these questions, because there seems like very big gaps. There seems like very serious problems here that's making this investigation unreliable, therefore making this case possibly unreliable.
And maybe just false.
Probable cause is the standard of proof. Funny how no one in that mainstream media narrative ever dug into what probable cause actually looks like, just how low probable cause is.
Because probable cause is manipulated all the time. Like, a cop could pull you over and say, I think I smell pot. So now I have probable cause to search your car.
Absolutely.
But you don't smoke pot, and there was never pot in your car. He just claimed he smelled it. And that's so subjective that he can't be accused of lying. Yeah, I thought I smelled pot. It was actually a skunk a mile back, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah.
I was mistaken, or I don't know.
Yeah.
You'd have to prove he was lying, and you can't.
Yep. And I agree with you. And one interesting thing here is, are we seeing the interest in unsealing all these documents because the defense also feels like there's something weird going on here?
I mean, I believe, based off of what Ann Taylor's focused on, which is the grand jury indictment and the standard of proof, the exculpatory evidence, the IGG, how they got to her client, because that's what she's been focusing on, is how did they get to him, which is the same question I have and a lot of us have. I think that she does feel like something funky potentially is going on here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm really curious what you guys think. I was really stoked to hear this defense attorney, which I'll say her name again. It is check her out on YouTube, Natalie Whittingham, and her handle was Natalie Lawyer Chick. But she came on here and was talking about how the Sixth Amendment protects our right as the public to view a trial too.
Yep.
So very interesting stuff. It makes me look at this much different. It makes me feel like the defense could have sealed this in good faith, knowing that they had the intention to unseal it down the line once they gave a reasonable good faith amount of time for the prosecution or investigators to continue their investigation or conclude that investigation, and let Judge John Judge really get set into his role in this pre-trial. It only looks good faith to me, but I'm curious what you guys think about it.
Yep. Leave your opinions and thoughts in the comments.
Yes. Do that.